I just want to say that any potential lack of energy that you see in this video is not because of my thoughts on this album or anything like that. I am just really tired, hella stressed, mentally drained, not feeling my best, but I'm still gonna push it through and get this video out for you guys because you deserve it. I just hope I don't pass out while filming this. Future is back with his 8th studio album, High Off Life. I don't need to introduce Future again because you guys know who he is by now. Very popular rapper who I think a number of today's artists probably wouldn't exist without in a number of ways. He's had a huge influence on a lot of the modern day Soundcloud and mumble rappers that a lot of us have come to know and potentially love these days. I also don't need to reintroduce Future because this is not the first time that I've discussed him on this channel. In fact, his last record, Future Hndrxx Presents the WIZRD, was the first album that I reviewed on this YouTube channel. After 150 album reviews on my blog, that was the first one that I did a review of on this channel, and it was also a reaction because I liked to do reactions at the time. However, some of you may know this, I was notably pretty negative towards the album. I thought it was a bloated mess that didn't live up to its full potential, and it even landed a spot on my albums I hated list at the end of last year. And I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't sure if I was totally excited or ready for this album, specifically because I wasn't crazy about the single Life is Good that dropped before this album, and I also wasn't crazy about the fact that this is 21 tracks in 70 minutes, which is a bit longer than last year's album. Length was a big issue that I had with the WIZRD, and this one is even longer than that. What's kept me in Future's corner is not only his influence that I mentioned earlier, but also his ability to still craft solid bangers and have consistently strong features, even in what a number of people are saying is a late point of his career, I guess just given how long he's been around for. And I was just hoping and praying that that would pop up on this album. Fortunately, this record did improve immediately on one problem that I had with the WIZRD. The WIZRD was 20 tracks and only 2 of those tracks had features on them, which to me I thought was a bit of a problem because it felt like it was just too much of one voice. It's nice to have a couple different voices. Whereas this record has more features but doesn't feel bloated with them, and I think that's good because for 21 tracks it's nice to be able to hear more than just one voice, and having these other artists on here could break up some potential monotony. So I was hoping, despite the length, despite my lackluster thoughts on Life is Good, despite my lackluster thoughts on Future's last album, that he would win me over with this project. And to my everlasting surprise, he really did. This record has to be one of the most surprising releases of this year. And genuinely, I think this might be one of the biggest bounce backs that I've had in terms of reviewing an artist. I've had a number of artists put out weak records, then put out good ones right afterwards. It's kind of natural, it goes without saying. But I think it's very rare that I've had an artist jump from a terrible album to one that I really, really enjoyed, and Future managed to do that here. Now, I'll start off by saying this. Naturally, I don't go to Future's music for substance. Future is mostly known for his flexing, for his bangers, and right from the starting track, Trapped in the Sun, I knew that wasn't really gonna change. But that's not a bad thing, because again, I was just hoping for some more catchy bangers, just a little more energy than I saw out of the WIZRD, and fortunately, this intro track really fits that. I think Future's sing-rapping fits well over the light pianos on the song, and his flows feel very catchy as well. I was also pleasantly surprised by High Tech Tech. I wasn't sure I was gonna love the chorus, but I think the beat on the song is pretty chilly. Future goes very hard with his performance, which helps to continue the hot start that the album gets off to. That continues with Touch the Sky, another trap banger whose beat goes extremely hard and has some dark, haunting pianos to it, which Future just floats on with pretty charismatic vocal performances where he experiments a bit with his vocal effects and finds success in doing so. His rapid fire flows are also a nice touch, and I think this track really highlights why I find this album to be such an improvement over the WIZRD. The production is harder, the hooks are catchier, Future's vocals are even more compelling on a number of these tracks, and the album has some songs that really surprised me, like the track Ridin' Strikers. Initially, I thought it felt a bit samey compared to some of the earlier tracks, but I did like some of the clever instrumentation. Future was doing a pretty good job with his performance, and then the beat switch came in and I was immediately sold right there. It was slower, it was darker, but it was a very cool change of pace. I also enjoyed some of the trippy vibes of the track Hard to Choose One. It featured a somewhat lighter beat and some tiptoeing instrumental passages. Future's flow is a bit laid back, but it fits nicely for this type of instrumental, making this yet another enjoyable track. There's also the somewhat bouncy Up the River, which is light and almost ethereal, and I think Future's vocal performance feels more emotional. Once again, it's a great change of pace and another easy highlight on the album for me. Pray for a Key was a track that had to grow on me a bit. I did have to listen to it a few times, but it is one that I definitely enjoyed. The beat on this track isn't quite as big as some of the beats on some of the other songs, but I think that gives Future a good opportunity to go down a number of different lanes vocally, and the result is a song that really sells itself well on the vocals alone, helping it stand shoulder to shoulder with many of the other highs on this album. The emotional hits keep coming with Too Comfortable, which features a very twisty flow from Future to go alongside a beat that feels like it's built on some light guitar strums. It's a very potent track that was a pleasant surprise on an album that is just filled with pleasant surprises, like for example the track Outer Space B, which surprised me because yes, the light piano instrumental did feel a bit similar to some of the other songs on here, and the chorus might not be his tightest ever, but damn, this is one of those songs that I put into the category of stupidly catchy, where I couldn't tell you why I think it's catchy, but it just is. I also enjoyed the freestyle-esque track Accepting My Flaws, where Future speaks a bit about his girlfriend Lori Harvey. The song features a suitably emotional instrumental, and his performance is very impassioned as well. I know many say that Future is the king of misogyny and toxicity, and I'm sure there are plenty of lyrics on this album that will prove that. I can only hope this track is genuine, but regardless, it is one that I like. Although the lyric where he says, "I feel it in my bones when you've taken out my semen," bleh. Also, Tycoon is a hard late album banger that has some pretty good sonic twists and turns to it. It's got a bouncy drum beat, but it occasionally shifts into some mellow, ethereal interludes, which actually mix perfectly and feature more charismatic vocals from Future. As I mentioned, this record has a lot more features than Future's last project, which I was okay with because again, given that it's 21 tracks, it's nice to hear more than just one singular voice. And what's more, the features are mostly really good here. Travis Scott jumps in on the track Solitaires, and right from the jump, I really loved how hard the beat was on this track. It's no surprise that a Travis Scott featured song has some good psychedelic vibes to it, and I think the vocal interplay between Future and Travis is just amazing. It's an intoxicating banger that's just hard to resist. Trillionaire features an appearance from Youngboy Never Broke Again, and I was surprised by how minimal this song felt. The instrumental is moody and spacey, and again I was very impressed by the vocal trade-offs between Future and Youngboy, who helped lift the song and make it feel very fulfilling despite its pretty short length. The track Harlem Shake also features Young Thug, though this was one that I probably could have cut from the album. The instrumental has some nice dark moments to it, but I think Future's flow and chorus are a bit repetitive. He's just not here long enough to make a big impression on me. Though I did love the track All Bad featuring Lil Uzi Vert, which has a very colorful, clever, almost video game-esque beat that I probably wouldn't have imagined Future spitting over. Again, it probably helps that Uzi is on this track and this sounds like something Uzi would do, but regardless, both Future and Uzi sound amazing on this one. The vocal trade-offs are great. It's definitely one of the highest of the high points on this album. As I mentioned earlier, Life is Good features Drake on it, and I'll be honest, I wasn't crazy about this song when I first heard it. It felt like two completely different demos that they had laying around that they just tried to turn into a full track, but to no avail. I don't think it sounds that much better in the context of the album, and the remix with DaBaby and Lil Baby adds nothing to the song. It only makes the track drag out longer than it already feels like it does. Last Name has a guest spot from Lil Durk, who actually sounds pretty good on the song even if he's not here all that much. This is a lighter, somewhat more R&B song where Future talks a bit about his many baby mamas, and his crooning I would say sounds pretty good here. Also, 100 Shooters, the album's closer if you don't count the Life is Good remix, has a pair of guests in Meek Mill and Doughboy, and it's a very satisfying finisher. The beat is built on what feels like a pipe flute or something like that. Future's chorus, while using an unstructured flow, sounds really solid, as does his verse, though I don't want to know what he means when he mentions that lyric about pissing on bitches. Meek Mill comes through with a strong and energetic verse that, for the first time, actually features an I'm the shit pun that didn't make me cringe. Don't get any funny ideas though, I don't want to hear any more of those. And then Doughboy comes through with this very gritty verse that I think just rounds out the song amazingly. Of course, like I said, this is a very long album at 21 tracks, and I will say that there are a few songs that are weaker than others. I already mentioned Harlem Shake, Life is Good, and the Life is Good remix, but beyond that, One of My was a perfect example. I didn't really care for some of the slower, somewhat more bassy instrumentals on the track, and while I don't mind some lyrical repetition if it's catchy, this one almost felt too repetitive, and the flow just isn't quite as catchy as some of the other tracks on here. And Posted with Demons instrumentally didn't vary too much from a number of the other songs, and it didn't really stand out as a huge highlight for me, even though it was elevated a bit by some of Future's smooth flows that fit nicely over the beat. That said though, I think the lowlights are pretty few and far between on the album, and for the most part, if nothing else, even those Future's lowlights are actually pretty listenable. Outside of Life is Good and its remix, I surprisingly didn't find any moments on this album that read to me as being skippable. When I reviewed the WIZRD, there were a ton of moments where I wanted to skip tracks, but here, I don't know, despite being 21 tracks and being so long, there's not many moments where I'm frantically reaching for the skip button. I'm kind of just enjoying the ride. I'll be honest, I was thrown for quite a surprise with this album. As I was listening, I was kind of waiting for and unfortunately expecting that kind of moment where it was just gonna fall off, but it never really did. With how much I didn't like the WIZRD, this has to be one of the biggest bounce backs for any single artist that I've reviewed on this channel. Yeah, Offset's last album was better than the Migos related projects I had reviewed beforehand, but technically he wasn't bouncing back from his own struggles, he was bouncing back from the group's struggles. Here, Future bounces back amazingly from the WIZRD with an album that I think is stronger in every conceivable way. The production goes way harder and is way stickier than a lot of what was on that last album. The hooks are far more catchy, and Future's vocal performances are filled with even more energy and charisma than before. Yes, it's still a very long album, and I'm sure it's going to be polarizing for that reason. Being that it's longer than the WIZRD, there are going to be a bunch of people who find this thing to be bloated, but it even feels like Future's been able to improve on that for me. For starters, the songs in general are just far better, which makes this a more gratifying listen than the WIZRD. And despite being a longer album, it doesn't feel like a longer album, like it's pretty well paced. And the fact that the album contains more features means that potential monotony is broken up more easily because Future is not the only voice on this thing. What's more, not only do most if not all of the features sound great, but they have consistently great interplay with Future, and it feels like Future and his feature artists were always bringing out the best in each other. I worried after hearing Life is Good that even if this improved on the WIZRD, it might still be disappointing, but that track and its remix are pretty much just blips on the radar of this album. And the rest of this record is filled with hits on hits on hits on hits. I don't know if I've ever enjoyed a Future project this much, and I don't know when or if I ever will again, but with High Off Life, Future did damn right. Easily one of the biggest surprise albums of the year for me, and an incredible bounce back for Future. My favorite tracks from this thing, there are a lot, so get ready. Trapped in the Sun, High Tech Tech, Touch the Sky, Solitaires, Riding Strikers, Hard to Choose One, Trillionaire, Up the River, Pray for a Key, Too Comfortable, All Bad, Outer Space Bit, Accepting My Flaws, Last Name, Tycoon, and 100 Shooters. And my least favorite tracks on the album are One of My, Harlem Shake, Life is Good, and the Life is Good remix. Overall, I'm pleasantly surprised to say this. I didn't think I really would, but here we are. Future's High Off Life is gonna get an excellent rating from me. I know, if you've been following this channel and you know what I said about Future's last album, I'm just as surprised as you are. But it's a happy surprise. I'm happy this record turned out to be so good, and no matter whether I enjoy a Future project this much again, I'm glad this one came through with a lot of bangers. But of course, that's just my opinion on this album, and I'm sure that this record will probably be polarizing for some. Even the WIZRD was a bit polarizing for some. I wasn't the only one who thought that it was bloated, but also a bunch of people thought the album was amazing. So I'm sure that'll happen again here. So what do you guys think about the album? Are you with me? Did you love it? And did you think it was just filled with hits? Were you one of the people that thought it was just extremely bloated? Are you indifferent to this album and Future as a whole? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section. Let's keep it civil and have some fun. If you guys want to hit like and subscribe, thank you. If not, no big deal. I totally understand. I'm seeing that next week is the 1975's new album, and I will be sure to check that out. I'm also seeing that KSI is dropping an album next week, and I kind of want to listen to it, if nothing else just because of morbid curiosity. So no promises, but don't be surprised if you see a review of that next week. Until then, thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.